So, yeah, welcome everyone here and people online. I'm very happy every time to be back here in Laxam in Zurich, whenever I'm in Switzerland. So today the topic is from dependent arising to compassion. So in the morning, today in the morning, we will talk a little bit about dependent arising, and then in the afternoon, we will see how it connects with our generation of compassion. So to start with, maybe we can just start with a little bit of a meditation, just to calm our mind and come to the present moment. We take a comfortable posture, sitting on a chair or on the cushion, having the spine upright, and then we focus inward. We let go of our sense perceptions, the outside world, and we try to just focus on our breathing for a while. We let go of our thoughts of the past, our worries about the future, and just come here to the present moment. Whether you're here in Laksam, come to this place, feel the place, feel your body, and feel your presence. Observe your breath, and at the same time, be aware of your mind and let go of your thoughts, and just feel your body, feel the breathing, and like that, we just focus on the breathing for 10 minutes maybe. And then we can slowly stop our meditation. We can again direct our senses outward, feel the presence of the people around us, our surrounding. Maybe open our eyes, stretch our bodies. And we can rejoice that we are here, we are healthy, and we have this precious opportunity to meet with other like-minded people, having the chance to spend time thinking and contemplating about the Dharma, doing something really meaningful. So then we start with generating a good motivation for this day, for this talk, for the meditations and discussions we're doing. So we can first think how fortunate we are to be here. Very fortunate situation, and it's good to rejoice on what we have. We have this precious human rebirth. We are more or less in good health. We have a sound mind. We can understand what we hear, and we can make use of this situation, our time, our freedom we have, and we can do this for the benefit of ourselves as well as for all sentient beings. And we can think how we ourselves, we all want happiness, and we don't want suffering. And just the same, all sentient beings, they also desire happiness and don't want suffering. And in this way, we are not different from others. Neither our friends nor strangers, even our enemies, they all also want to be happy and don't want to suffer just like ourselves. Same with animals and other sentient beings. And like that, it's not proper to just be concerned with our own happiness and ignore the suffering of others. So here, when we practice Dharma and try to contemplate, try to hear teachings and meditate about it, this is a path which leads us to happiness, to ultimate happiness, the path which leads away from suffering. And we're doing this to find real and lasting happiness, which goes beyond worldly happiness and pleasure ordinary people are looking for, to find real lasting peace of mind. And for this, we try to understand how our mind works and try to get rid of the delusions which cause our mind to upset our mind and lead to suffering, lead us to do actions which are causing negative karma, which lead to future suffering as well. And we try to generate positive states of mind like understanding, wisdom, love, compassion, and so forth. And we do this for our own benefit in order to progress on a path to enlightenment, just like Buddha Shakyamuni did, and he did achieve enlightenment in India 2,500 years ago. And he taught the teaching, he taught the methods which lead to enlightenment. And now here we have the fortune that we still have realized masters around, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, like our personal teachers, who teach the Dharma just like Buddha Shakyamuni did. And we have the fortune to be able to hear these teachings, to contemplate about it and meditate about it. But we're not doing this just for our own benefit. We do it also in order to generate these positive states of mind and eventually achieve enlightenment. And with these skills and methods, we will be ultimately able to benefit sentient beings, not just in a small way, but just like our teachers, like when we look at the activities of His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and other great masters, what they do in the world, and also Shakyamuni Buddha, his teaching are still helping so many sentient beings. So if we progress on the path, we will become like that. So this is the bodhicitta motivation. And to reinforce this motivation, we can recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. We can do it once in English, and then we do it 2 times in Tibetan. I take refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Sangye Chodam Tsoki Chonam Lam Chanju Bardu Dani Gyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gipe Sonam Gi Drola Benjir Sangye Drupasho Sangye Chodam Tsoki Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani Gyapsu Chi Dagi Jinzo Gipe Sonam Gi Drola Benjir Sangye Drupasho. So today the topic is from dependent arising to compassion. So Teres suggested this topic, and I'm very happy to explore on this. It's not such an easy topic, but we will try to keep it simple. And it's a very important topic. It's the two main aspirations or qualities we need to develop on the path to enlightenment. Generally, it's considered wisdom and compassion are the two qualities we need in order to get enlightened. And dependent arising is an aspect of wisdom, and then compassion is also an aspect of the bodhicitta motivation. And these two, they are two separate qualities, separate things, but they're not completely separate. If we develop one, the other one will also increase, and they go together. The more we generate our wisdom, the more also our compassion will grow, and the other way around. So we will explore this connection and how our understanding of dependent arising can help us to generate compassion. So yes, so these are the two perspectives we need to develop on the path to enlightenment. So one compassion is the way we interact with others, with the world. It gives us some guidance and orientation how to skillfully interact with, especially with other sentient beings. And the wisdom aspect teaches us how the world exists, how we see the world around us. So one is about how things exist, and the other one is how we interact with others, let's say. Our relationship we have with sentient beings. And when we think about karma, for example, how all our actions, everything we do has an effect. Like every action, even small one, has an effect. Like we can talk about cause and effect. And every action of body, speech, and mind, whatever words I say, has an effect. And if I say words which are motivated by compassion, the effect on others will most likely be beneficial. If they're motivated by non-virtuous motivation, like greed, hatred, and all the negative states of mind which come from ignorance, then the effect will most likely lead to suffering for others. We might say words which harm others. We might do actions of our body which harm others. And even our thoughts, if our thoughts are motivated by ignorance and delusions, like negative, so-called negative states of mind, the outcome will be suffering. So what are negative states of mind? So generally we can say every state of mind which results in suffering is a negative state of mind. And this is suffering of ourselves as well as suffering for others. And the positive states of minds are those states of minds which lead to happiness, and mainly in the long term. Like sometimes our ignorance may tell us that we gain something from some negative actions, but this might be some short-term gain. And if we look deeply, we can see that these actions are not virtuous in the long term. So that's a definition of virtuous actions and non-virtuous actions. Like every virtuous action is leading to happiness for ourselves and for others. Even though at the moment, maybe sometimes it's difficult sometimes it's maybe easier might be more difficult to say the truth. It might be uncomfortable in some situations, and we may tell a little lie and think it doesn't matter, or we may cheat a little bit here and there. It's quite common to cheat with the tax form. Why should I pay more than necessary? Or in relation with others, maybe some little lies, some cheating here and there makes life much easier in the short term, or we believe so. But if we have a really ethical background, especially if maybe we take some vows and we make a deep commitment not to lie, to tell the truth, not to cheat, not to take anything which doesn't belong to us, even small things, to pay a fair price for a service we get, and so forth. This may look like it makes our life a little bit more difficult in a moment, but on the long term, we will get the reward. And I think people will trust us more, even in this life, and we will have, our reputation will be good, and we will just feel better. We will naturally feel more happy, and I think at the end of our life, when we look back, we will not regret anything. And this is just for this life. But also when we look at karma, like as Buddhists, we believe in karma, which means the cause and effect is not just what we see in this life, that the causes we create in this life, the positive and the negative ones, they're carried to future lives, and we will have the results ripening in future lives of our virtuous and as well as our negative and non-virtuous actions. And in the same way, all the results, what we have in this life, all the comfort and happiness we enjoy here in Switzerland, like it's not due to our hard work. I mean, we believe that we are rich and comfortable in Switzerland because we're such hardworking people. And to some degree, it might be true, but there are people in other countries in the world which work at least as hard as we do, but they just don't get anywhere. And when we see how relatively easy it is to earn money and have a comfortable life here, like many things which we take for granted in Switzerland is an absolute luxury in most of the countries in the world. And this is just, I just feel I'm so incredibly fortunate to be born here, to have a free education, school system, and generally things are, of course, there's many things which can be improved. Also here, not everything is perfect, but the things we have, the comfort we enjoy right now, is mainly a cause of our virtuous karma, which is ripening. And it's good to appreciate what we have and also make best use of this situation we have, and use the freedom and comfort we have to be able to develop our mind further and develop our good qualities and have an ethical life and work with our minds, and in order to be able to benefit sentient beings and not to create any harm. So when we think about dependent arising, so dependent arising, we can think like, what is dependent arising? It is how to say, so dependent arising in a Dharma way is explaining how things exist, how reality exists. So normally this is connected with the teachings on emptiness. So emptiness is a very difficult concept, and emptiness is basically the antidote to our wrong views, our wrong conceptions of how things exist. So this is the root of, considered the root of all our problems, our wrong understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And if we don't really consider deeply, we may think that things just exist the way they appear. So how do things appear? So if we look at an object outside, um, let's take the cup. So of course the cup is here, and we think there's a cup here, and there's a person there, and I just see the cup as it is. And this works pretty well in normal life, and we don't really see a problem. So when we look at the cup, it feels like the cup is just there, existing from its own side. Like we just think it's there, and we just see it because it's there. And we don't really see the whole picture, because the world, the universe is extremely complex. Like in reality, everything is interconnected. Like nothing exists on its own. Like the cup, it only exists. There's causes and conditions which make this cup into a cup, and there's when we see the cup, it's just there, but actually the cup is only there because actually somebody made the cup, and it's made of certain materials which are come from certain places, and somebody designed the cup in a certain way, and that it actually is here on the table. There's many conditions. Somebody bought the cup in the shop and placed it here. So it's not just there, it's there because many conditions came together. And it's infinitely complex. So for us to really see it as it is, it's quite difficult. And then the same about the person seeing the cup. Like we think we just see it because it's there, but in order to see the cup, we must have a concept of the cup. And if we never learned about what a cup is, then we wouldn't really see it in that way, or it's in some way there's a lot of projection going into the way we see the world. Like with a cup, it might be easy, but we might think it's a nice cup, or it's I like this cup, I don't like it. But when it comes to the world around, there's many things which we see, or just concepts we have about how the world exists, which are ideas which we have created in our mind, which then we project into the world and makes the world our reality. Like for example, other persons, we see a person, and what we see is just the external appearance of a person, and from that we interfere that this person is in a certain way, like the way the person talks, the way she behaves, the way the person looks like. We have a certain idea who that person is, but we actually never know who that person really is. It's all just assumptions, and they might be more or less correct, and sometimes they might be useful in certain way to see if a person is gonna help us or harm us. But we always have to be careful, because we might be wrong, and even if we are right in some ways, we never really see the person as he or she is. And the same goes with our ideas about the world around, about countries, and especially politics and so on. These are all very complex things. Like history, we learn about history, and we have a certain view how things are, how the world is, and why it's like that. But this is all due to our state of knowledge we have. And the more we learn, the more we can see things maybe in a different way. So things are not so solid as they look like. And therefore it's very important to be open-minded to change, and to always question our view of the world, to really always check up, is it really like that? Is it as I see it? And not just seeing with the eyes, like, because what we see with the eyes represents what our ideas we have in mind. Like even scientists, they say that here's something that, like, what we see, 30% comes from outside, and 70% actually comes from inside. And I don't know how you see this cup, and it's impossible for me to know. But we can all agree that it's a cup and it has a certain shape. But so there's some agreement on certain things. That's how we see the world. It's generally an agreement that this is a cup, and in Buddhism is defined as something which is able to hold a liquid, and is empty inside, has a round shape, and we can use it to drink and so forth. So this is something we agree on. But then there's other things where there's maybe less agreement. So we can agree that things exist in dependence on each other. So intellectually we can understand that nothing exists from its own side. Like, it sounds a little bit absurd to think that the cup is just there from its own side. And intellectually, we all understand that, yes, there are causes and conditions which make this cup, or which are necessary for this cup to be here. Same like for me as a person, I'm not just here like that without causes and conditions. And intellectually, this is very easy to understand. But at the same time, and this is the difficult part, that even though we may agree that I'm not a completely independently existing person, but at the same time, when we don't really look and don't question, we go through life and with this feeling of I, as if I would be an independent person, independent from others, like I'm an individual. I have this education. I am like this. I have these skills. I can do this. I'm a professional in this or that. And so forth. So we have these ideas about ourselves, and they might seem so solid if we don't question. But all these qualities, they all have causes and conditions. They're all dependent arising as well. So it's good to always go back and check up. Like, even for a yogi or a meditator, they, on the path to enlightenment, at some point when they realize emptiness during the meditation, then during the meditation they realize the emptiness and they see things as they are. But when they're not in meditation, until they reach a very high level, when they go have a break and make a cup of tea, then things again appear as if they exist from their own side. So it's a long process to familiarize ourselves with a different view, the view that things are dependent arising. So emptiness is quite difficult, and if we meditate on emptiness without understanding dependent arising, there's a danger that we generate wrong views, because emptiness can, when we hear that things don't exist as they appear, they don't exist from their own side, and then we meditate on emptiness, then we might fall into the extreme of nihilism, to think like things don't exist at all. And in order to prevent this wrong view, like there's the two extremes. Like generally, I think, especially maybe here in the West, we are in this extreme of externalism, that we think like everything exists here and solid. And this is how mostly, I guess, science works, that there is a cup out here, and then we can analyze how it exists. And it's only because it does exist. But then we ignore the fact that for this cup to exist, there has to be someone actually perceiving the cup. Like it only exists because I see it, but we think it's there by itself. It's there anyway, and then I come along and I see the cup, and then I can analyze how it's there. And if I'm not looking at the cup, it's still there, just like that. But when I'm not looking at the cup is still there, but I don't know in which way it's there. And maybe if you look at the cup, you see it anyway. You see it from the other side, and maybe you see it different. So that's your perception of the cup, and this is my perception. And there's never really an ultimate way a cupness on its own, which is absolute. But the extreme view would be the belief that when I don't look at the cup, it stops existing, which is kind of falling into nihilism. So we have to find the balance between this view of I'll say that things exist from their own side, and the other extreme, that things don't exist at all. And Lama Tsongkhapa, he explains very well that before really analyzing emptiness, it's important to understand dependent arising. And dependent arising, I always found emptiness, something I thought like, oh, it's too difficult. I will try to understand this later. And whenever I hear something, I think, oh, maybe I understand something, and I think it's also important not to think when we understand something, I think like, oh, now I got it. It's not that difficult. And sometimes we hear people, they understand that things are existing in dependence on other things, and oh, emptiness is not so difficult. But there are even Lama Tsongkhapa and some great scholars nowadays, some geshes who have studied for decades. They're still trying to get the ultimate view. So it's not so easy. And when we understand something, it's maybe good to think like, yes, I understood something. There's probably more to it, and maybe I'm not really there. So, but dependent arising is a bit more easy, because emptiness deals with negation. Emptiness negates the wrong view we see things. And then it's an absence of this wrong view. That's basically the emptiness. And dependent arising is, sometimes it's explained like the two sides of a coin, like emptiness and dependent arising. And they're not contradicting. So when we, and that's a difficult part, that to see that the cup is empty of inherent existence, but at the same time, it does exist. So how does it exist? It exists as a dependent arising. And for me personally, I always found this very difficult. And but then when I hear about, or I got some teachings about dependent arising, I thought like, oh, that's something I might be able to understand. So for me, that's very useful and very inspiring to, and that's exactly how Lama Tsongkhapa also approaches the topic in the three principal aspects of the path, or the three principles of the path. So the three principles are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness. So it's a short Lamrim prayer, or Lamrim, just a few verses. I think it's 13 verses or 14. So it's page 79. So and the first verses are about renunciation, and then he talks about bodhicitta. So now we can go to verse 9. Maybe I can just read the, if you don't have the text, you can just listen to it. Here Lama Tsongkhapa says, without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation and a mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling in cyclic existence, samsara. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. So here he doesn't say attempt to realize emptiness. He says attempt to realize dependent arising. Because ultimately, when he talks about the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, so that's the wisdom realizing emptiness. But first, try to realize dependent arising. And then verse 10, he goes on, one who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena, of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow, as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas. So here in the beginning, he says, the cause and effect of all phenomena. That means in both cyclic existence and state beyond sorrow. So samsara and nirvana. So this is all, the whole universe, everything which exists is either samsara or nirvana. And both of them, they are cause and effect, like they are a dependent arising. And then he goes on, when we see that things are dependent arising, at that moment, we don't grasp at the things as existing permanent and independent. So like that, when we see things as dependent arising, at that moment, our grasp at an independent existence, which is false, which is not true, that wrong view actually disappears. And then verse 11, he says, if the appearance of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, as long as they are seen as separate, the one has still not realized the Buddha's intent. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa explains that emptiness and dependent arising, they're not separate. They're not the same, but they're not contradicting. And this is the really difficult part. So if one sees them as not separate, then one has realized the emptiness correctly. So for us at the moment, we just try to see dependent arising. But it's good to know that when we understand dependent arising, we are also getting closer to see things more in the way they actually exist, the way the Buddha explains. So we can just repeat, like dependent arising, it means that things don't exist on their own. They don't exist without a cause, which is pretty logic. But still, if we don't question, then things don't really. Sometimes when we go to a, when you go home, you can just watch your mind and see, like, how do things appear when you walk down the street. Oh, there's a car there. Oh, there's a house. Oh, there's a person. Oh, this is like this is like that. It just appears as if it would be there without me doing anything to it, without having any wider connection. But then, of course, if we say, like, oh, why is there a car there? Because somebody parked it, somebody bought it, somebody built it, and there's many causes. But it doesn't look like that. Like the first moment, it just seems to just be there. And then when we try to investigate dependent arising, it's explained that there's 3 types of dependent arising. And the first one is dependent arising of cause and effect. So that's maybe what we've been talking about, that for the cup to exist, there needs to be a cause. And we mentioned, like, somebody made the cup, it was made from something. for a tree to be there. It grown. It came from a seed. Maybe somebody planted it, or it fell there by causes, and there were the right conditions. There was the soil. The seed fell on the soil. There was moisture. There was sunlight. There was heat, and so the seed grew into a tree. And yes, it's easy to understand. But when we see, oh, there's a tree there, we forget all the causes which lead for a tree to be there. So when we walk down the street and see a tree, it just appears to be there. But to see the tree, we first need to have an idea of tree. And then we see the tree and it fits to what we learned as a tree, and we say, oh, there's a tree. We recognize it as a tree. But actually, we need to separate the tree from everything else to see it as a tree. Like if we can maybe just for ourselves, we can imagine a tree. I don't know if you have a tree in mind, which you remember somewhere where you live, maybe a nice tree in your garden or somewhere on a hill, or just try to see a tree which you're familiar with, or otherwise you can just imagine an imaginary tree. So imagine that tree, and when you think about that tree, that's just a tree. But actually the tree, when you see it in nature, maybe it stands on a hill, maybe there's some mountains behind, maybe there's some buildings behind, maybe there's a whole surrounding. And if we look at the whole picture, then we just see tons of things. But actually, we want to see a tree, so we have to cut the tree out of the things which are behind. It's a bit like, like on a computer with a mouse, we can go around the object and then cut it and paste and copy or whatever. So that's basically what we do when we walk down the road and we see a car. Then we separate the car from the road and from the house behind. That's how we can see. So whenever we see an object, when I think about this cup, then I kind of ignore the table and the air and the space around to make it into a cup. So that's how we see things as separate from everything else. That's how we can talk about the cup, because we separate it from everything else. And in daily life, it kind of makes sense to do this. But then the problem is when we grasp at this appearance and think that that's how it actually exists. So when you imagine this tree we were talking about, so imagine the tree and think about it, then where does the tree begins? And like we can see the tree and we can talk about the tree, and in that sense it works, it makes sense. But then if we investigate is the tree we see when we're standing in front of it, is it really like that? Like where does it start? Where does it end? Like we imagine the tree, but actually when you look at the tree, you imagine the tree probably, of course, the tree has roots, but did you imagine the roots of the tree when you were thinking about tree? Like I usually, when I think about the tree, I only think about the thing which I see. But of course, without roots, it's not a tree. So actually, the tree is not complete without its roots. But we don't see it as like that. So the tree doesn't end where the ground starts. It goes into the ground. So there's the roots. Without the roots, there's no tree. But then we can go further and even above ground. Of course, there's only air around it and space. But even the air around the tree is constantly interacting with the tree. So we cannot say this is the tree and there's the air which is just around, which is not the tree. And in the ground with the root, the water in the ground is not the tree, but there's a constant interaction of the tree. So when the water is outside of the roots, it's not the tree, but then when it goes into the roots, then it becomes the tree. So there's never actually a clear separation. What's a tree and what's not the tree? But we do this, and it's not wrong. It's can be useful, but it's also not correct. And so just to be aware that when we talk about the tree, we see it as if it's separate from everything else. And the same with us as a person. I think about me, so I'm here, I'm this person, and there's this feeling I'm an individual, I'm separate from you. And of course, we are separate, we are different. But then it's the same like with the tree. Where does my body start? Where does it end? Like I can say, okay, I'm here, and that's me, and that's the cushion I'm sitting on, and it's separate. But then the same with the air I'm breathing. The air is not me, but when I'm breathing it in, and then the oxygen goes into the blood system, and then it becomes me. And the tea, there's a cup and there's tea. And this tea, which is in my stomach, now is actually not tea anymore. It's part of me, it's part of my body. So the water and the food and everything, like our whole body, is actually just parts and particles from space. We are just made up of non-body elements, which are somehow mixed together, and now we call it our body. So Thich Nhat Hanh, he often speaks about interbeing, and he always says it like that, like our body is made of non-body elements. The tree is made of non-tree elements. Like we can break it down, the tree, into its parts, like the leaves, the roots, the branches, and the leaves are not the tree because they're the leaves. They're part of the tree. And the water in the soil is not the tree, but it can become part of the tree. So the whole tree is made up of different elements. And at some point, the tree will die, it will disintegrate, it's not a tree anymore. But all the elements, they don't disappear. They just take a different aspect. So when we really analyze, it's just like a constant flux and a chaos, and things are coming and going, and we are just part of it. Like our body is, I don't know exactly, basically water, which is also made up of different elements. And then there's the more solid elements, the skin and the flesh. I don't know really what's made of. Some parts of the food and things we take into our body, which become our body. And then, of course, there's the mind, which is the aspect of understanding and like the knowing aspect. Like the body just has these functions, but then there's the mind, which understands, which cognizes. And the mind is again made of different parts. It's not just one solid thing. The mind has feelings, emotions, and different qualities. Sometimes the mind is calm, it may be agitated. There's different mental factors of understanding, of perception, and many, when we study the mind, we can see it's not just one thing. There's many things making up our mind. And the mind is functioning together with the brain and the body, at least at the moment when we're alive. So because we have this type of body, our mind functions within this body, so we perceive things in a certain way. If we would not have this body, our mind, if we would have the body of a bird, we would have the mind of a bird, which is in some way, it's also mind. It's not completely different, but of course it functions different because it has its limitations, because it's in the body of a bird. So yes, to see that we ourselves, we are just a dependent arising. So we are a kind of a coming and going, and it's not fixed. It's not like, it's not an individual, because it's completely interconnected with everything else, and it's also not static. Like it's constantly changing. That's another aspect which we usually don't take into consideration, that everything is constantly changing. Like it seems permanent, but actually it's a constant change. And then if we contemplate like that, our world starts to look very different. We are not this single individual thing anymore. We are part of a whole thing. And actually, it's kind of beautiful also to expand our perception of ourselves into being interdependent and interconnected with everything else. And this is much more in harmony with reality. And that's where all our problems come from, because we have this wrong view that I'm a self-existing individual, which I have to protect, and I have to fight with other individuals, and so forth. All these problems come. But when we see ourselves as completely dependent arising, completely interconnected with everything else, then we can see that my happiness is not different from the happiness of others. And I can actually only be happy if people around me are also happy. And if I contribute to the happiness of others, just by itself, I'm feeling better. So this is how the wisdom of emptiness, or the wisdom of dependent arising, can also help us to break this boundary we made about ourselves, and to have a wider perspective of seeing everything as interconnected. And from that, when we don't have this strong view of an individual self, the more we let go of this concept of I, then the more there's space for others, and the more we can generate compassion, and the more easy it is for us to benefit others, and not just people, also animals, and the whole, also the environment, like everything which is alive, our whole planet. It's all part of me, basically, and I'm part of a whole. So time is running fast. I thought I don't have enough to say, but now maybe just to quickly finish. I mentioned 3 types of dependent arising. One is dependent arising of cause and effect. I think I explained a little bit. Then this is kind of a more gross type of dependent arising. And then there's a more subtle type of dependent arising, which is depending on parts. And we explained this a little bit also, like the tree, it's not just one solid thing. The tree is made of non-tree elements. It's made of the leaves, the branches, the roots, and even the soil, which is not actually the tree, and the water inside the tree. So this is depending on parts. And there's also meditations about this. In the text, they talk about the parts of a chariot, of a cart, and we can think about the parts of our body, like I mentioned, like my body is, we think it's one thing, but actually there's so many parts. And then we can think like, oh, my hair is not my body, my finger is not my body, my whatever, my brain is not my body. And then we can take it apart, and then in the end we think like, oh, there's no body, which is actually not correct, because there is a body. There's a body which is a dependent arising of these different parts. So it's always dependent arising, but only take the parts, the different parts away, and then we come to the conclusion, oh, actually it doesn't exist. Then we forgot about the dependent arising. So depending on parts, or also depending on each other, like with concepts like big and small. Like we cannot say, oh, this is a big cup or it's a small cup. It depends. It's all only big in relation to a smaller cup, and hot and cold and so forth. So this is depending on each other, depending on parts. So this is a little bit more subtle type of dependent arising. And then the most subtle, the third type of dependent arising, is depending on designation. So this is a bit more difficult. Like I also mentioned, like the cup exists like that because that's how it's kind of my projection on this cup. And certain things, they only exist due to our projection. It's like also the kind of I, like there's this body and mind, but then there's this feeling of I, which is just something I project on the body and the mind. And maybe to understand this projection, a nice example for me is for example, money. Like money, of course, it exists, it's quite real. We're very attached to it and we use it and it's useful. But actually, when we look at the paper money, we have a 20 Swiss franc bill and it has this value, and I can go to the shop and buy something. I can buy apples for 20 Swiss francs. So I really get something for it. So it actually has a value. But the value of the money is completely something designated, is something we project on the money. And it's kind of an agreement with others, like the shopkeeper and me. We have this agreement. I give you this piece of paper, which is completely useless and worthless. And he gives me apples for 20 Swiss francs. Because he knows with this piece of paper, he can again pay his workers and so forth. So this agreement that this useless piece of paper has this amazing value. And because we have this agreement, this designation, this projection, that's why it works. But if somebody starts questioning it, then within no time, it just becomes a piece of paper. And it sometimes happens. Like in India, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, Modi, he printed new 500 rupee bills. And then overnight, the old ones were not valid anymore. And the people who declared their taxes and the money they have, they were allowed to change the old ones into new ones according to what they have declared. But all the black money people had stored somewhere, which they haven't declared in their taxes, they were not able to change in the bank. So some people, they lost millions of undeclared black money. At least that's what they say, that was the purpose. And it was complete chaos. And it shows that this, you have this 500 rupees, and 500 rupees in India is quite some money. You have this bill, and then I think it was a weekend, and then the next Monday, it was only, you could only change it for a new bill or a certain amount everybody could change. But if you had more, or if you didn't have a bank account, then it was, and then, now somehow I came across one of those, I don't know, I still had one, or somebody gave it to me. And then I was not sure. So in a restaurant, I asked, oh, can I pay with this one? He says, no, this is an old one. I said, what can I do with it? He said, you can stick it on the wall. You can do what you want, but it's useless. And so that shows that how, things exist because we project something on it. And it's not the ultimate reality, but it's a convention, and it can function to some extent, but we should not be fooled by it. And we do this all the time. We project a value into many things we own, and just believing that we own things, for example, too, like we think, oh, this is my whatever. You buy a piece of land and it's yours, but it's just, you think it's yours, and maybe your neighbor agrees that it's yours, but how can you, for some tribes, they cannot imagine how you can own a piece of land, because the land is just there. So it's just an idea that if I pay some money to someone, then this piece of land is mine. And there's many such ideas and concepts we have and we work with, but it's good to think about how much they're in accordance with reality. And when we know that money doesn't really have any value, we are much less attached to it. And when there's a financial crisis and our money loses, what's worse, because the banks, they just produce money. In the past, there used to be some gold, but that's not the case anymore. So there's no real value behind. And for some reason, it still seems to function, but I wonder how long. And when the whole financial system, if it collapses tomorrow, I will not be surprised, because it's all a big bubble. Mm-hmm. And the people, I mean, the experts, they know it's like that, but somehow, because everybody believes in it, it still functions, and you can still make a lot of money with it. But if somehow people stop believing in it, then it might collapse. And then, yes, and same with other things. We think it's, in the past, people used to collect stamps, and they had a lot of value. Nowadays, even those stamp collections, they're worth nothing, because, I don't know, people are not interested in collecting stamps anymore. Or some old furniture used to be, people used to pay a lot of money. And then at some point, maybe people like modern things, so the old things they just have the value other people are willing to pay. So it's all just coming and going. It's just a dependent arising. And when we know about this, then we get less attached, and we are maybe a little bit more closer to reality. We have less expectations, and we are seeing things a little bit more as they are. And yeah, to think like that, it can be very useful for us not to have attachment, not to have aversion, and to also generate some compassion. So now we have half an hour left. So are there any questions, maybe, so far?
I mean, you talked about that dependent arising. I've heard this a lot, looking at cups and out external objects. Does that also apply to like our internal concepts, our thinking?
Yes.
You can also look at that, your thoughts like that, and feelings, and I think it's difficult to actually see them. I mean, you can see a cup, can't you? I can't see my, But it's the first step to actually see that there are some concepts.
Yeah, I think for me it's easier to explain things with about the cup, but actually the goal is to really look at your internal, like your concepts and whatever is going on inside, like how you see yourself, like your feeling of I, who am I, to see that this is also concepts, and my thoughts, how real are they, and how we think it's, when we're sad, it seems so solid, so concrete, and we think it's everlasting, but it's just a certain emotion which is coming and going. And yeah, I think that the main goal is to really look at our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, and whatever we have internally. Yeah, so, but of course it's more difficult.
Very difficult for me to, but yeah.
But there's many ways, but to start with, we can just start investigating how external objects appear, and to see like, oh, they're not quite like that. And then we can look at ourselves. We can look at our body, which is also easier. Oh, how's my body? Where does my body start? Where does it end? Oh, I have a nice body. Oh, I don't like my body. I'm proud of my body. And it's changing constantly. One moment we think like, oh, I'm healthy, I'm fit, and then think, oh, I'm so tired. I'm getting old or whatever. So it's constantly changing, and it's also depending arising. Like at some moment we feel like this, and then we feel like that, and we can influence it also how we feel. So it's quite interesting. So it's just nice to sometimes sit down and just see what appears, and then like when I look in my mind, what appears, when I think about me as a person, what appears, and then we can check, is it really like that? And maybe next moment it's again different, and to see that basically it's all dependent arising. These three ways of dependent arising, cause and effect, depending on parts, and also depending on concepts, on projections. And we can find it in external things and also internal.
I think if money is physical, it appears to have more value than if it's only digital. So it's more difficult to hand over like a 50-franc note, buy something. If it's a note, you're paying with your phone, it's much easier.
Oh, yes.
This is one reason why they want to introduce digital payments for everything, I think.
Well, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny how they make it, they tell everybody it's really easy to spend your money, but they forget to tell you how difficult it is to make it. Yes, you can spend it, just go like this. Yeah, yes.
I think it's an interesting change of concept of a social agreement. And I'm thinking of my grandparents, they were extremely proud not to have any debt. I'm talking no debt at all. And nowadays, I mean, it's for the young generation, they start in life, especially in the US, and the normal concept is to start in life with debts, and somebody will save me. I think this type of concept had huge implications about the social fabric of interconnectedness, of like, I think the part of here also, I mean, what is the room to influence? The room to influence, even though we don't exist, I think, as separate, but somehow in this room of influence I have, there is a lot I can do, and also to take responsibility for myself, but also in this interconnectedness. And for me, this is with this concept, like to have debts and somebody will save me, is for me somehow almost the opposite of taking responsibility for myself. Question mark, maybe you want to say something.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, like certain concepts and ideas, they also change, and then we can think like sometimes we think like, oh, this is true and this is not true, and because it's true, I believe it. But most of the time we don't know what's true. But then I think it's interesting to see like what's useful, like having debts or not having debts. In the past was not considered good to have debts, but then to think like to just see what's good for me, how do I feel, what's beneficial, like with these different concepts we have, to see not is it true or false, or also, but also is it beneficial.
Hopefully not just from my perspective.
Yes, I mean, yes, but also we can, for us, we can maybe see, oh, it's beneficial for me to think like that. Like, I don't know, like a certain person, I don't know if he's a good person or not, But if you think he's a good person, like for me, I try to, first of all, think people are in generally good. But sometimes we are told people are actually evil. It's just like they manage to control their evil, selfish behavior. And you can walk around thinking that people are selfish and evil, that's how we are. And sometimes that's even what we're taught sometimes. But then we can think like, I don't know how people really are, but I like to believe that people are basically good. But then sometimes they have delusions and they do things which are not really in accordance with their good nature. So it's just certain concepts, I think, for me, they're helpful in order to be more positive. And other concepts, they make my world more like same. If I think about this interdependence, then the mind opens, and I feel gratitude and love. And when I think more about me, myself, then my mind gets more closed, and then I'm become afraid of things. So I think it's good to just see which ideas are beneficial and which are not, and then also question some norms of society if they're actually beneficial or not. So if there's no more question, maybe we can end with the meditation. So it's a meditation about into being, about ourselves, and yeah, how do we exist, who we are. So we take a comfortable posture. And then we relax. We can focus on our breathing for a few breaths and let go of our thoughts and emotions, and prepare our mind for a little analytical meditation. And then with a calm mind, we try to look inside, internally, and try to feel yourself as the person you are. Try to get a feeling of the I, the sense of I, or me, you identify yourself with. And just try to analyze and hold this feeling of who you are, this I, this person. And this feeling of I seems to be quite real. And if you don't analyze, you may feel like it's there from its own side. But then we can understand that this feeling of I, it depends on the view you have on yourself, and it becomes stronger if you remember something you have accomplished. We can try this, like think about something you've done. I've done this, something, maybe something you're proud of, something, maybe even something good, something you have achieved in your job, or and then you get this feeling, oh, I've done this. Then the I may become a bit stronger, more solid. Or also something you possess. If you have a house, I bought a house, I have a car, or something you like, something you're proud of. So we identify with what we have done, what we possess. Or we may identify ourselves with what we do, what we are, like I'm a professional, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a monk. Try to see this feeling of I'm this, I'm that, if you have this. The feeling of I has many aspects. And then also, the stronger this feeling of I is, the more we feel as a separate individual. And we can maybe notice this separation from others when, for example, we generate pride or anger. So we can maybe remember a moment of pride or anger, and then see how our feeling of I is more separate from others. But this feeling of a separate individual person, which I am, is not in accordance with reality, even though it appears like that. So let's analyze. Do I exist in this way as an individual existing person? If we look, maybe we can see that I'm existing due to causes and conditions. I'm existing due to my parents and grandparents. And we can maybe even remember their kindness. We can think about the skills and the knowledge I have today, which I'm identifying with, and maybe I'm even proud of it. But all these are things I learned from my parents and my teachers. And the education I have is also because of teachers, schools, universities, and the government providing all this. There's many causes for us to have all this knowledge. Even the things I possess, the money I have, it's because of this education, it's because of my job. the person I'm employed with, or my customers. It's all because of the money I could earn with other people. And everything I have, the house I'm living in, the clothes I'm wearing, the food I'm eating, and basically almost everything I enjoy today is not created by myself, but only by the kindness of others. If I would really be on my own, I would be quite lost and sad. So we can see that everything is interconnected. Nothing exists on its own. This is because that is. I am because others are. My well-being depends on the well-being of others. I'm not an individual, I'm part of a whole. The more I give, the more I receive. And try to feel this connectedness with everything around. Feel, let go of this illusion of a self and try to embrace the world around with everything in it. All the people, all the sentient beings, the whole nature. There's no more separation between us and others. Love and compassion arise naturally. So try to feel our mind expanding and feeling the connectedness, that there's no separation between you and everything else. and feel maybe you can feel some sense of harmony, openness, warmth, maybe some love and compassion towards others. If there's any such feelings arise, then just focus on that feeling or emotion. In future, when you again feel like you're a separate individual, maybe you can remember this meditation and remember that you can also feel yourself as part and interconnected. It all depends on us. So then we can slowly enter meditation. And then we can dedicate all the positive energy we have generated during this meditation and also during this morning. We can think that due to this virtue, I quickly become a Buddha and lead all sentient beings to that state. That be the cause for us to get enlightened quick, so we can help all sentient beings. And maybe be able to generate positive states of mind. And through that, even in this life, be able to be an inspiration and a help to whoever we encounter, and like that contribute to a more peaceful and loving world. Changjub Senchok Rinpoche, Ma Kiepanam Kiekuchi, Kiepan Yempa Mepayan, Gone Gondu Elvan Show. Okay, so we have a break now, lunch break for an hour and a half, yes. So we continue at 1:30. Thank you.